Oceans cover over 70% of the Earth's surface. They not only serve as the planet's largest habitat, but also help to regulate the global climate. The ocean is a continuous body of saltwater that surrounds the continents. It is divided into 4 major regions: the Pacific, Atlantic, Indian, and Arctic. The ocean contains traces of all chemical elements found on Earth, but it tastes salty because of sodium and chloride ions in rainwater runoff and minerals from geothermal vents on the seafloor. Climate change is altering the ocean in 3 major ways. First, the ocean is getting warmer. The greenhouse effect not only warms the planet, but also raises the temperature of the world's oceans. Over the past century, the ocean's surface temperature rose at an average rate of about 0.13 degrees Fahrenheit per decade. And during the past 30 years, sea surface temperature has been consistently higher than at any other time on record. This warmer water vaporizes quickly, fueling stronger and more frequent storms. Higher temperatures also threaten delicate ocean life like coral reefs and disrupt the food chain, from krill to penguins to seals. Second, since 1993, the seas have been rising at a rate that's twice as fast as the long-term trend. Sea levels rise not only because water expands when it heats up, but also due to melting glaciers and ice sheets. Rising seas contribute to flooding on once dry land in coastal regions. A third consequence of climate change is ocean acidification. Seawater absorbs CO2 from the atmosphere, which lowers its pH and results in higher acid content. This reduces the concentration of calcium carbonate, which makes it difficult for species like oysters, clams, and corals to form shells or skeletons. The only way to stop the damage to our oceans is to dramatically reduce greenhouse gas emissions. But even if emissions stop tomorrow, the gases currently in the atmosphere would take decades to dissipate.
As pessoas não têm ideia do que acontece com o lixo a partir do momento que ela se livra dele.
E esse conceito, né, que a gente ouve, né, desde os nossos pais, né, põe o lixo para fora, leva o lixo para fora. Na verdade, não existe para fora. Então, para fora é o fora de casa, da nossa casa. Mas, na verdade, o fora é o planeta inteiro.
Um papelzinho de bala que se você jogar no chão vai pro bueiro. Do bueiro vai pro rio, do rio vai aí pro mar e do mar vai pro mundo inteiro. E os adultos acho que não pensam na criança, acho que eles pensam só neles.
É difícil pra gente, até inconcebível, a hora que você começa a treinar seu olhar para isso, não questionar por que as pessoas ainda jogam lixo na rua. Né? Será que elas não percebem? Será que elas não veem essa quantidade de lixo que vai para os bueiros? A gente tem na nossa cidade problemas com enchentes que são geradas pelo excesso de lixo. Né?
Isso causa gasto ao município, causa doença à população, que é o caso que nós temos aí do escorpião, temos o caso também do Aedes aegypti, que causam várias doenças para o cidadão riopretense.
A pessoa acha que a partir do momento que ela joga no lixo ou, infelizmente, joga no chão, esse material vai sumir. Ela se livrou do problema, mas na verdade ela passou o problema dela para sua comunidade.
Então, quando a gente fala em descarte irregular, é muito difícil você ver alguém descartando de forma irregular meio-dia, no topo do sol. Normalmente você acorda e você vê aquele lixo que não existia no dia anterior. Então, isso já demonstra claramente que as pessoas entendem o que pode e o que não pode.
Quanto mais lixo a gente joga, quanto mais se joga na natureza, mais as espécies que vivem na natureza vão se extinguindo. A gente depende delas para a nossa própria sobrevivência, né? Então, por exemplo, por causa da quantidade de lixo que hoje em dia tem nos oceanos, né, grande parte dos peixes que a gente come, que vem dos oceanos, já tem microplástico. Ou seja, a gente está comendo o próprio lixo que a gente joga fora.
We travelled up and down, 50 miles off the coast, for 2 weeks, trying to get close to these animals.
Oh, look, look.
At 2 o'clock, and another blow 4, and it looks like he's going to fluke up and dive. So he'll probably be down for another 10 minutes or so.
It's the first time that we believe that anyone has ever filmed a juvenile pygmy blue whale underwater. They look like freight trains, like enormous spaceships that just travel effortlessly.
What do you think it's from, Alex? Is it from a ship?
We were in the Indian Ocean off the coast of Sri Lanka, where there hasn't been any commercial fishing because of the civil war. The beaches have been closed for up to 30 years. We thought this was a relatively pristine environment.
This is all some of the rubbish that we found in the floating jetsam and flotsam in the ocean. We'll get Ben to go through it, but there's even a pack of unopened biscuits. You can see it's been there for some time with the mollusks that are growing off it. There's crabs. There's a crab in there. Look. So quite extraordinary.
Another one here.
This is right in their environment.
They take in hundreds of gallons of water, they express that water, and they feed off the krill and tiny fish. But they can't tell the difference between krill and plastic. I started to wonder what's happening in oceans elsewhere on the planet.
I didn't know that in the last 10 years, we've made more plastic than we did in the century before that. Half of those plastic products are considered disposable. But think about it. How can a disposable product be made of a material that's indestructible? Where does it go?
Hey Mike, it's Tanya. Can you tell me what you're seeing down there?
So we're just under 400 meters now. Almost 1,200, about 1,200 feet. And now we're starting to see a plastic bottle, exactly. We're now starting to see more and more plastic, more and more tires and pieces of metal, and just absolutely disregard for the bottom, really. It's just junk everywhere.
Our scientists commissioned a small, remotely operated vehicle to travel over 1.5 miles down to the deep trenches.
The ROV is coming down, which is kind of cool.
Here, where the daylight never reaches, the eddies and currents have collected scores of plastic bottles. This plastic could remain here forever. About 8 million tons of plastic is dumped into the world's oceans every year. More than 50% of marine debris, including plastic, sinks to the bottom of the ocean.
Where in the world can you go anymore and not find plastic?
$63 billion gallons of oil are used every year just to supply the US with plastic water bottles. In this year alone, every single person on the planet will use and dispose about 300 pounds or 136 kilos of single-use plastic.
Plastic is wonderful because it's durable, and plastic is terrible because it is durable. Almost every piece of plastic ever made is still on the planet in some form or another. Plastic production globally this year is expected to be more than 300 million tons.
Half of which we'll use just once and then throw away. By 2050, when the population explodes to almost 10 billion people, it's expected that plastic production will triple. The problem with that is that today only a fraction of the plastic that we produce is recycled. The rest ends up in our environment, and it's coating our land and our oceans like a disease.
Over 80% of ocean plastic leaks from land-based sources. Even if you don't live near the ocean, chances are your plastic garbage has found its way to the sea.
Our producer Joe Ruxton was familiar with the story about a huge floating island of garbage, twice the size of Texas, in the North Pacific. Joe joined Dr. Andrea Neal and her team on an expedition to this great Pacific garbage patch.
So we're deploying the Manatrol, and we're going to look for fine particulates and debris. This mesh here is 333 microns, which is in the size range of zooplankton.
The manta trawl captures material on the surface. It will take anything the size of a pinhead or larger. Looking out over the vast expanse of clear, sparkling water, there is no plastic in sight. The contents of the trawl are emptied and floated. The tiny pieces of plastic then reveal themselves to Joe and Dr. Neal. There is no floating island of plastic. What exists is far more insidious. What exists is a kind of plastic smog. These tiny pieces of plastic that are floating on the surface of the ocean come from larger pieces. Over time, the sun's ultraviolet light, ocean wave action, and salt break it up into smaller pieces called microplastics. Microplastics have rough, pitted surfaces. Waterborne chemicals from industry and agriculture stick to microplastics, making them toxic poison pills. The sea at night is one of my favourite times. It's when the ocean truly comes alive and you can virtually see the food chain in action. Zooplankton feed on phytoplankton, small fish feed on zooplankton, squid feed on small fish, and so it goes on, up and up the food chain.
There's some ectophids in there. Wow, as well as these ones. Well, should we get them on the table and open them up and have a look and see what's in there?
We'll start with this guy.
I handpicked the pieces of plastic. This is what we found. So what this means is the feeding that's occurring on the surface of the ocean has these plastic fragments floating around and is actually intermixing in the food chain. You know that plastic doesn't degrade. And most of the time we say it breaks down, but that's probably not an accurate way to say it. It actually breaks up, so it's more proliferated. And when it's proliferated, there's more opportunities for plastics to be ingested.
Many of the marine creatures eating this kind of plastic are in our food chain. Does that mean then that this plastic is getting inside of us?
The problem is these plastics adsorb chemicals that are free-floating in the ocean. So when the fish eat the plastics, those toxins then migrate from the plastic into the mussels or the fats, the parts that we like to eat in fish.
Building up in the fish then as they eat more and more of them.
And so that's the part we like to eat, and that's where these chemicals migrate to.
In a recent study published in Scientific Reports, UC Davis researchers examined 76 fish slated for human consumption in Indonesia and 64 in California. They found that in both groups, roughly 1/4 had anthropogenic debris in their guts. When sampling blue mussels at 6 locations along the coastlines of France, Belgium, and the Netherlands, microplastics were present in every single organism examined. When you eat shellfish, you're often eating the entire animal, so you're more likely to eat plastic.
Dr. Jennifer Lavers, she devoted her life to studying the plight of seabirds.
Absolutely no doubt that this bird died as a result of that plastic.
Unbelievable. Jen, I counted 234 pieces of plastic out of that one bird. Is that a record?
Not even close, unfortunately. So for the species, the record is 276 pieces of plastic inside of one 90-day-old chick. And that plastic, when we weighed it out, accounted for 15% of that bird's body mass. So that's a pretty scary statistic. If we translate that into human terms, it gets even worse. That would be equivalent to you and I having somewhere around 6 or 8 kilos of plastic inside of your stomach. It's equivalent to about 12 pizzas worth of food inside of your stomach.
When animals eat plastic, they're also consuming the toxins attached to the plastic. Toxins pass into the bloodstream. There, they bioaccumulate in the fatty tissue and around the vital organs. When animals use the stored fat, the toxins circulate around the body, interfering with reproduction, metabolism, growth, kidney, and liver function. We gave in to the sales hype of the 50s that plastic was disposable, that we could throw it away. There is no away.
It starts with the individual, and it starts with us.
I think it's a shocking waste of valuable resources. We actually have the answers now to recycling most plastics, and the challenge really is to get everyone on board with those ideas, and also to get the collection infrastructure going right so that we get big volumes coming concentrated in one place so that people can then have the confidence to invest in the recovery technology.
Once sorted, recycled plastics are brought into factories like this, where they can become part of a circular economy, cleaned of labels and processed into newborn nurdles, ready to be sold once again.
A poluição com petróleo nos oceanos pode ter um efeito destrutivo na vida marinha. Muitas vezes é preciso um grande acidente, como um vazamento ou a explosão de uma plataforma, para compreender sua extensão. Manchas de petróleo podem chegar à costa e matar aves e mamíferos marinhos. Mas esse tipo de vazamento representa apenas 10% da poluição. A maior parte acontece no tráfego, com despejos ilegais ou atividades industriais na costa. O impacto depende do ambiente. Vazamentos em alto mar levam a poluição limitada e mais fácil de limpar. A mancha fica mais densa, afunda, quebra e é destruída por bactérias. Em uma costa rochosa ou uma praia aberta, podem ter um impacto importante no ecossistema marinho e demorar até 1 ano para a limpeza. Recifes de corais são muito sensíveis. O dano é irreversível e a regeneração pode demorar até 10 anos. Em mangues ou bancos de areia pode causar danos muito graves por mais de 20 anos.
Estraga a água.
João, vai vendo, está bem? E dizes-me.
Mais, só mais um pouco.
Já está? Assim se passa a mensagem. Em Portugal, vão pelo cano abaixo, por ano, 35 mil toneladas de óleos alimentares usados. E se este óleo alimentar usado for despejado na banca, segue o seu percurso até às estações de tratamento de águas residuais. Segue, mas não devia seguir porque 1 litro de óleo alimentar usado pode contaminar 1 milhão de litros de água. Se a opção for outra, os óleos alimentares usados podem ter vida nova. Podem ser valorizados de várias formas. Há empresas que os recolhem, há empresas que os tratam e há também empresas que os transformam em sabonetes ou em biodiesel, por exemplo. A Agência Portuguesa do Ambiente diz que as entidades responsáveis pelo Sistema Municipal de Gestão de Resíduos, as câmaras municipais, são obrigadas a disponibilizar uma rede de recolha seletiva de óleos alimentares usados até ao início de 2025. É por isso de esperar um aumento do número de oleões a nível nacional nos próximos anos. Diz ainda a APA que é muito importante a sensibilização dos consumidores para a separação deste resíduo nos domicílios, assim como em restaurantes ou cantinas, por exemplo. A distribuição de oleões por todo o país tem de contribuir para este objetivo. No sítio da APA, na internet, tem mais informações sobre os oleões e a sua localização.
global clothing consumption has doubled in the last 15 years. We can change that.
When we make better, we can buy better. And when we buy better, we can wear longer.
When we wear longer, we can buy less.
When we buy less, we can waste less.
And when we waste less, we can change for good.